Durst the worst?
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst.
Oh, Durst the worst.
Durst is the worst.
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst?
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst.
Part 2 of the Uptalk vocal fry. Let's see how far I can get into this motherfucker again. More Jennifer Mueller from Skidmark College, denigrating white people with her collegiate level gobbledygook. Compliments of the ivory tower. Let's do this.
Who, beyond not being disturbed by the things that they're finding, they will go on to say, like, this is what I'm going to continue doing.
Yep.
And sometimes do it in really contorted ways. So in one example in the paper of a student who, again, is conceding the reality of racism in her family history, she talks about how disappointing that is to her because she's probably going to unconsciously reproduce these patterns, which of course there's a paradox there, because how do you unconsciously reproduce patterns that you just said you know about? But then she literally goes on to say how it's going to happen. I'm probably going to do this, I'm probably going to do that, so she gives us a little bit of a list of what she's planning to do, right? And
right. Okay, so what you just heard there is basically, this is reason number 9,654,553 why you don't give any quarter to these leftists at all. You don't grant any of their premises at all. So this is basically the broader context. You can see it in the previous video. A student did a paper or something basically conceding that, she's implicitly racist or whatever. And so now this person's, Jennifer Mueller is sinking her teeth in and just continuing to pathologize and demonize this white student. And I mean, she's saying, like, how do you implicitly do something that you've admitted? It's like, well, she's only saying that because she's trying to fit in your awful cult-like behavior and your awful cult-like indoctrination and cult-like environment. She's a victim of psychological torment, right? I mean, that's what we're seeing, right? That's what we've seen manifest from this sort of woke, anti-white nonsense. But do continue.
so you can see in that kind of example that there's this liminal space between knowing and not knowing at the same time that's happening. And that, again, ironically, or there is research that suggests that when you reinforce to people what the sort of benefits of racism is, that actually can have a way of reproducing or reinforcing our solidarity as a collective to that system.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there, because I
What?
was going to make the point that it seems like the research on these diversity training sessions, if they are done in the way they're typically done, which is short-term, lack of follow-up, lack of good quality, is that it does seem to reproduce some of the stereotypes, but also the idea that white folks are in a position of dominance, almost because that's either the natural order of things, or because it kind of reinforces like meritocracy ideology. That
There you go.
If it's the case that so many people of color are in disadvantaged positions, that must be because of their inherent merit relative, instead of the very systemic disadvantages that the diversity trainings are intended to highlight, which is
Wait, what?
just some more evidence.
Oh, okay. So are they going to actually cite anything real, or they're not going to cite, IQ average differences between the races? They're not going to bring up any sort of deterministic realities about, I don't know, like different genes, different testosterone distribution in the blood. They're not going to bring up different histories, different regions of the world, bringing about, different cultures, different bone structures. I mean, different brain sizes, different, fMRI, brain scan showing different things amongst the races. They're not going to bring up any of that stuff because it reinforces a, what did he say, meritocracy ideology. So the very idea that there's any such thing as meritocracy and that white people would be, by the way, white people are not at the top in terms of meritocracy. That's just not true. I think East Asians typically are. Everybody knows that. But meritocracy ideology, I think that means to them, like, pointing out, yeah, white people are where they are due to merit. We built this fucking country, and quite frankly, Blakes did not, right? So that's supposedly racism. It's not. If you're in a class like this, if you have to suffer through a class like this, my advice to you would just don't give them any quarter whatsoever. Or maybe just smile and nod and just give them some like gobbledygook, like systemic systems of structural institutions. Just basically rephrase that over and over and over and over again in your papers. You know what I mean? And they'll probably be like, oh yeah, the systemic structural institute. Yeah, wow, stunning and brave. Again, like if you're in unfortunate enough position to actually have to sit through a class like this, it's just insane.
I thought your
dude.
example in the paper of Melanie, a young woman who, this is a pseudonym obviously, who comes from a wealthy white family, is a great example of this. And this may be the person that you were talking about. Here's a person who comes from, again, a wealthy family, knows about intergenerational wealth transfer that is racialized and the way she's benefited from white dominance. And then she talks about her future and how her family, like when she has children and when she raises them, they're going to benefit from all these things. And, they're going to move into a nice leafy suburb with great schools that are supported by property taxes of other white families. And at that point,
so what?
She's going to teach her kids the way things should be, which of course is, decades into the future, right? Versus what she might be otherwise interested in working on now.
You're not sufficiently indoctrinating your own kids to, and abusing them psychologically for their identity. So it's not soon enough. I mean, what is he saying? What is this queefy wanker fucking saying right now, dude? What is he fucking saying other than that? It's just garbage. It's nonsense. It's abusive. This stuff should not exist at the collegiate level. It should be completely stamped out culturally.
Move into a
physical removal.
Suburb with great schools that are supported by property taxes
of
other white families. And at that point, she's going to teach her kids the way things should be, which of course is, decades into the future, right? Versus what she might be otherwise interested in working on now.
Yeah, so Melanie is a little different. So that the other student that I was describing, we put her in a theme we call racist. So like she's a person who's saying like, I'm definitely going to reproduce these things. It's going to be unconscious. It's really unfortunate that it's happening. Melanie is in a category we call interventionist. And these are students who complete the research and their practical takeaway is that like something should be happening to remediate this. But what we find amongst the interventionist takeaways is that very rarely are they personal. So very, very few students say, I feel personally responsible to do something about that. Only maybe 3 students out of 105 say that. But they go on and they sort of diffuse the ways they think this should be happening. So Melanie, the student that you're talking about, she creates a kind of perplexing takeaway. She talks about how the ways that her family gained wealth and power made her upset. She acknowledges that there are still problems and that her family is still contributing to colorblind racism. But then she pivots into what we call an almost magical confidence to describe how her family was, quote, making every effort to move forward and to help make this world a less discriminating place to live. And I, if I could indulge and just share the quote, because I do think it's pretty powerful to making the point that you're offering here. She writes, I know our racism is not on purpose, and that is why I know that we will make a positive impact on the march to equality. I think that with the wealth and capital that we've obtained over the years, we will use it in ways that will help for the better. Learning the knowledge that I'm learning in my classes will help me to teach my children the way things should be, in hopes that they will be able to use their wealth for the good of others. I feel like my family is a great example of each generation changing to make the next generation a better one. So she...
Okay, no quarter. I'm just going to be repeating myself. Do not give them any leeway. If you're in a class like this, just systemic systems of structural institutions, or raise your hand and argue and document what happens, I guess, on video. Call out for what it is: psychological torment and abuse, unilaterally attacking white people. So even when white people are trying to give you conciliatory gesture after granted premise, after we'll try to do the work, we'll try to take our own resources as a family that you've just arbitrarily decided were unjustly gained because we're white. We'll take our resources as a family and we'll use it to help black people or whatever. Even that, they just consider you scum regardless, right? And they're putting you on a freaking list. She said they have different categories for the different kind of white racists, basically. They're putting you on a freaking list. These small hats, they really, really, really love their lists, don't they? Man, these people suck.
It really just creates this fantasy reality of what's going to happen. You know, and we sort of point out the paradox that by her own evidence and her own analysis, her family is in fact a great example of the mechanisms that maintain white power and privilege and wealth, which she concedes, but she projects an alternative reality for the family that's defined by their progressive anti-racism. And so, you know, the effect of this psychologically is that from the unconscious racism of the past and the current generations through this like projected anti-racism of a future generation, she's enshrined the morality of the whole intergenerational family in perpetuity. And that's, again, that's a lot of work in a tiny little statement, right? To sort of enshrine this intergenerational reality where, yeah, they have the things that they have, but also they're on the right side of things. It's in the same way that there's a clear distortion, as with the student I described who, you know, talked about why slavery was an important part of her family's history. Even though here we have a student who's like, yes, this is a big part of my family's wealth, she still finds a way to sort of buffer and insulate from that. And it has practical consequences.
The fact that we haven't successfully buffered and insulated our children from monsters like this is an affront to everything that is decent and good and orderly. And yes, meritocratic, Christian, you know, if that's your thing. All of this is just anti-goodness. This is just degenerate, it's evil, it's sadistic, it's cult indoctrination. This person is just stripping these people down, you know, making them second guess their identity, making them second guess to what degree they are meritocratic and to what degree they've achieved in their lives. This is evil, sick fucking shit. I think that, you know, for me personally, I don't know about you guys in my audience here. If I meet someone that's even remotely like this, Jennifer Mula, I have to just turn tail and run away or just mock them, right? It's fight or flight. You know, those of us that like the fight, if we're in the mood, we'll just sit there and mock them and deride them and tell them that they're a leftist piece of shit. Or if we're just, you know, in a non-confrontational mood, just get up and walk the fuck away. Those are the only two options, like I said. These people are awful.
Which is a key point that we want to make in this paper, that cognition takes place in a field where we are anticipating always the futures that lay before us, and that our cognition comes into the work of these anticipated futures rather than just unfolding from the mental ideas that we have in our head.
I mean, this student's story reminds me of Victor Ray and Louise Seamster's paper against teleology. Like, Melanie's story seems to be like, things are getting progressively better and better. Maybe the implication of that is the horizon of racial justice is ever receding, right? That
yeah.
You know, since we're on the march, we can affirm that we are good white people who are using our wealth and our privilege, however we gained it, right? For the good.
But you need to know you're bad white people.
Good of all people, which itself is kind of a colorblind statement. But we get credit for being on the path.
Yeah.
And so, you know, my children are going to be in a better place, even though, of course, like, that's not how it works. And I think, you know, many scholars would say every time there is, or many times when there is some sort of so-called racial progress, you must always be looking for the backlash, right? And sort of the retrenchment. And so I think that kind of theory has been empirically supported over the last 5+ years in the United States. Even recently with, you know, the summer 2020 protests over police killings, unarmed Black Americans.
Oh, no. The guy in Kenosha pulled a knife and he was driving away with the kid in the back of the car. He was a fucking rapist. He violated his restraining order and, like, raped his chick. No. Unarmed doesn't matter either. People can become armed pretty much immediately. Especially if you're fighting with a cop or resisting arrest, you can reach for the cop's shit. But do you think Daniel Morrison and Jennifer Mula, do you think they're going to give a reasoned and balanced perspective on that? Probably fucking not, because they're liars. They are charlatans. They are sadists. They are cultists. And they have complete hegemonic control over educational institutions. Boomers, how the fuck did you let this fucking happen? Why the fuck did you allow this to fucking happen? And if you look at boomers and like various cuckservatives and lolbertarians, okay, they honestly believe that sitting around and like poning the libs for another 40 years is going to do something about this. Like putting another Matt Walsh documentary out is somehow going to do something about this. Although, by the way, you should check out that Matt Walsh documentary, What is a Woman? It's pretty entertaining. Will stuff like that move the needle? I don't know. Will it prevent people like this from having, or will it get the ball rolling in terms of getting people like this out of our educational institutions, out of media, out of corporate boardrooms, out of various entertainment mediums, you know, like all that kind of stuff, out of gaming, for fuck's sake, out of the music industry? I don't know. We might need something a little bit more mustachioed,
you know, and then a spate of laws, for example, that would criminalize certain aspects of gathering and protesting, and then indemnify people who run those protesters over with their cars. Mm-hmm. In any case, it's a fascinating story and evidence for your argument.
These people are so gay and fake and gay.
Again, this is about practical accomplishment, or at least laying the groundwork for the practical achievement of maintaining white dominance, right? And so I think your observation of the ever receding, the way in which, you know, our cognition can imagine an ever receding space of racial justice, right? That's part of what's speaks to this intergenerational logic. And
I know I have a little bit of a verbal tick, probably because I'm listening to these people. I'll say right too. But whenever I hear that, especially to this frequency, along with the uptalking, the vocal fry, I think those are signifiers that they know they're bullshitting. They have to keep saying right, like, right. They don't have confidence in their positions because they know that they're full of staggering quantities of horse shit. You know, they're full of just truckloads of donkey shit, right? It's just, look out for those indicators.
Motion. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I would say too, like, from the producing colorblindness piece, I mean, one of the questions I sometimes get asked is like, so if you continue making ignorance hard for white people, right, does our ignorance ever evolve? And I think, you know, like, this is a philosophical question on some level, but yes, I think the reality is like, there's no point where it's like, you know, we can't twist our thinking, right, to maintain the denial that we want to, right? That you can't necessarily force that forward, that we have an incredible capacity to create new distortions, even as they might accommodate information, right? And so I think that's part of what's pretty powerful about this paper, again, is because it emphasizes the students who aren't trying to resist the reality of systemic racism. And I think this is part of what should give us pause, too, in this particular historical moment. I mean, arguably, right, we're in this moment, you mentioned the summer 2020 uprising. I mean, I can tell in the course of teaching, I mean, I've been teaching now for, like, coming up on 20 years. And, you know, I'm sure you noticed too, right? Our students, they come into our classrooms, or at least the students I teach, they come into my classroom, they know a lot more about racism than they ever have in the course of my career, right? And we know that we're still in a lot of the mess that we're in. And so the assumption that we can progressively raise consciousness and that will be the corrective is incorrect. And as you point out, right, that part of what I think what we're seeing now is a retrenchment against the racial knowing on some level. With all of these bans taking place against CRT, we can argue, of course, political means as well. There are ways to mobilize bases and under the threat of what's happening to the children and so on and so forth. But
Dude, can you shut up?
So,
Does she ever stop talking? I mean,
on some level, right?
She's just rambling incoherently. Like,
They will have the effect, or can have the effect, of dulling the knowing that has emerged in the past decade or so.
yeah. So no quarter. Argue with them, or just don't take their class, right? And if you have to take their class, just systemic systems or structural institutions. Just say that over and over and over again. I'm almost tempted. I think, maybe the next set of Deux the Worst videos should be sort of auditing a class like this, and just I'll record myself. My participation in class will just be that. Like, so what do you think? What is your opinion on the systemic system of structural institutional inequality of institutions and structures? And just so it's an institutional structure of systemic systems. Or is it a systemic structure of institutional structures? Just say some total fucking gobbledygook like that, and then get a bitch like this going. Just get her going, on some insane fucking tape, basically, some insane loop, like an NPC. But yeah, that's about as much of that as I can fucking take. Subscribe, hit up my subscribe star, hit up Odyssey, hit up BitChute, hit up Gab, hit up Minds, hit up my Twitter, hit up Telegram. Hit it all up. Hit up Spotify, my tunes, which I will play you the new one, Do Nothing, now.
Nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, yeah, good boy, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, yeah, good boy, just a reptile, gone on some hill, on some hills, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, you good boy, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, you good boy, down rabbit hole, bitch off and hurt, stopped on the blues, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, you good boy, did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, nothing, did you nothing, I did you nothing, you good boy, did you nothing.
I ain't do nothing.